She was delicate, too delicate for a world that would soon be painted in blood. Born Maria Teresa Luisa of Savoy, she glided through marble corridors like a ghost of lace and perfume, adored by those who knew her, and hated by those who didn't. They called her l'ange de la cour, the angel of the court, not for her piety, but for her porcelain skin, her mournful eyes, her soft-spoken grace. She was everything the Revolution despised. At the heart of Versailles, she was Marie Antoinette's most trusted friend. Some whispered it was more than friendship that the queen and her Lamballe shared a bond not meant for court gossip. Others simply noted how inseparable they were. Lamballe became superintendent of the queen's household, a title soaked in privilege and resentment. While peasants starved outside the gates, she attended masked balls and diamond tiaras, sipping spiced wine beside a queen draped in imported silks. The gulf between palace and people yawned wider with every step she took. But Lamballe was not cruel. She was naive. She truly believed that her gentleness would shield her, that France would never turn on a creature so fragile, so harmless. She stayed by the queen's side even as the court rotted from within, even as the whispers of revolt grew louder. While others fled to safety, Lamballe refused. She thought loyalty still mattered in a crumbling kingdom. Then came August 1792. The monarchy fell like glass against cobblestone. The royal family was imprisoned, and Lamballe, ever loyal, followed them into captivity. She was transferred to La Force prison, an overcrowded hell of stone walls and desperate men. The air reeked of unwashed bodies and fear. Her name was already on the lips of the angry mob outside. Royalist. Favorite. Enemy. On September 3rd, the gates opened. The September massacres had begun. She was dragged before a revolutionary tribunal in a blood-stained courtyard, the cries of the crowd echoing off the walls like a chorus of death. They gave her one chance to swear hatred against the monarchy and against the queen. She refused. Her voice didn't tremble. She would not betray the friend she had loved more than life itself. They beat her. They tore her apart. The details were so monstrous they were once dismissed as exaggerations, but the records persist. Her body was mutilated beyond recognition. Her head was hacked off and placed on a pike. Her hair was styled. Rouge was applied to her dead cheeks. And then, in one of the most chilling acts of psychological torture in history, that pike was raised to the window of Marie Antoinette's cell. The queen collapsed. But what if that never happened? What if in the chaos of that moment, amid blood screams and confusion, Princess de Lamballe escaped a bribed guard, a sympathetic servant, a cloaked figure in the crowd? The details are lost to the shadows of this alternate path, but somehow she slips away. Wounded, half-dead, unrecognizable. Her fine dress torn and soaked in someone else's blood. She stumbles through alleyways, falls into a sewer grate, and vanishes beneath the streets of Paris. The world believes her dead, and maybe she is at least the woman they once knew, because what crawled into the darkness of that city was something else entirely. A ghost, a symbol, a survivor driven by pain so deep it curdled into vengeance. The revolution thought it had silenced her, but the angel of the court would return not with grace, but with wrought rage and a memory too horrifying to be buried. She would become the nightmare that Paris could never wash from its hands. Beneath the surface of Paris, where the bones of centuries lay piled in endless catacombs, she breathed. Faintly, each inhale a war against death. The sewers carried the scent of blood and rot, yet it was nothing compared to the smell that clung to her skin, the perfume of slaughter. Princess de Lamballe had been torn from the world, yet she lived. Somehow. The story whispered by those few who saw her crawl from a broken drainpipe near Montagne Sainte-Geneviève is always the same. A woman cloaked in filth, her scalp half shorn, her eyes white with fever. She looked like something already dead, dragged back by some unfinished curse. The old priest who found her father Delacroix defrocked and drunk believed she was a vision sent by God or Satan. He did not know her name. She did not give it. She slept on a pile of rags beside stacked skulls, the bones of plague victims, the forgotten dead. At night she dreamed of screaming crowds and severed heads, By day, she heard the city above roaring like a furnace revolution executions hysteria. Every echo of a bell made her flinch. Her hands, once soft and pale, grew cracked and blackened. She didn't speak for days. Then one morning she whispered the Queen's name just once and began to cry like a child. Father Delacroix saw an opportunity. He knew nobility when he saw it even in rags. He tended her wounds, gave her food, but in return he demanded her knowledge. Names, secrets, the hidden pathways of court life. She told him everything deliriously, and he listened like a vulture at a banquet. Soon he used her stories to blackmail remaining aristocrats in hiding. "She's still alive," he'd whisper, "and she remembers who betrayed the crown." Above ground, Paris reeled from the massacre that was supposed to have ended her. The newspapers had detailed her death with sick relish. They called it justice. A few anonymous writers questioned the spectacle. Was it really necessary to parade her head? But the official narrative stood firm: she was dead. And good riddance. This false certainty became a protective shroud. No one looked for her. No one imagined the lamb had slipped the butcher's knife. But the people below did. The criminal underclass, the undertakers, the mad. They began calling her La Dame de l'Enfer, the lady from hell. They said she wandered the catacombs trailing lace and bone dust, whispering in Latin to walls that bled. Some swore she had no face. Others claimed her voice could shatter stone. It didn't matter what was true. The myth had already begun. And she heard it. She heard them speaking of her in brothels and taverns and opium dens. She crept through the city like a shadow, now covered in layers of discarded clothing, her once golden hair darkened with soot. She moved like a ghost among the poor and the damned, learning to hide in plain sight. She never revealed her name. But when someone cried out for the Queen, when someone cursed the revolution aloud, she would stop and listen. The world had forgotten her face, but not her meaning. She was becoming something more than a person. She was becoming a story, a warning. Marie Antoinette, imprisoned in the temple, sat in silent despair. She knew nothing of this. Her last image of Lamballe was her friend's head swaying on a pike. That image replayed in her dreams again and again until her sanity thinned like old lace. If only she had known the truth. If only she had known the bloodied hands that had once cupped her own were still alive, battered but breathing beneath the very streets that held her prison. But something had changed. For months, coded whispers began circling among the Queen's few remaining loyalists. An escaped prisoner. A woman presumed dead. The details were impossible contradictory, but one phrase kept repeating. The lamb lives. In dark corners of the city, monarchists stirred. If Lamballe had survived? What else was possible? The Jacobins, meanwhile, began to feel the weight of her myth. Robespierre hated rumors. He feared nothing more than the ghost of a royalist. In the Committee of Public Safety, he snapped one night. If she walks among us, then we have not finished our work. They sent spies into the underground. Many never returned. And Lamballe. She waited, watched. She had not spoken her name in months. She was no longer the angel of the court. She was something else now. Her innocence had been flayed away like her skin on that September day. What remained was raw vengeance stitched together by grief. She sharpened knives in the dark. She remembered every name. She remembered every face. And in the silence of the catacombs, the dead whispered back. The Queen was dying by inches, but she did not weep anymore. Marie Antoinette had passed beyond grief. The prison walls of the temple scraped the last warmth from her bones. Her son had been torn from her arms. Her husband was a corpse beneath a pit of lime. And each passing day brought fresh horrors, the guards mocking her, the stink of the latrine, the scratch of lice under her corset. She had no one left, until the message arrived. It came hidden in the stitching of a pillowcase. An ordinary item slipped in during laundry rotations. She almost missed it. But as she fingered the edge of the fabric, she found a single word barely visible, sewn in delicate thread, Lamballe. The Queen collapsed to the stone floor. She clutched the pillow to her chest, lips trembling but silent. For a moment, she wasn't in that cell. She was back in the Petit Trianon, laughing, dancing, her dearest friend by her side. But the vision was soaked in blood. How could it be? She had seen the head. She had seen the teeth, the hair, the eyes. But now doubts crept in like spiders. Perhaps it had been a trick. Perhaps someone else had died in her place. Or perhaps someone had intervened. An angel. A devil. Either would do. The queen pressed her ear to the wall that night and whispered into the stone. There was no reply. But the walls remembered, and so did the people who walked past them. In the weeks that followed, more messages came, scratched onto scraps of wood in the firewood pile, etched with soot on the undersides of plates. Sometimes nothing more than a phrase, "The lamb walks." Other times a warning, "Robespierre fears ghosts." Lamballe had become a phantom among the queen's supporters. No one knew her exact location, not even the messengers. They simply followed instructions passed by word of mouth, etched into staircases, whispered in sewers. The laundresses became the first carriers, then the guards who'd lost loved ones to the guillotine. And eventually even an executioner who had once turned the crank now turned his eyes away when the queen's cell door opened. The network spread like veins beneath a dying body. It was fragile, held together by fear and memory, but it worked. Every so often, Marie Antoinette would find a familiar scent, jasmine or almond oil or a lock of hair tied in a silk ribbon. Tokens, proof. Her Lamballe lived. She began to change. No longer the broken widow hunched in rags. Her posture straightened. Her gaze, once empty, turned calculating. She began writing again, tiny notes in lemon juice, invisible unless held to fire. She marked patterns in her food waste, creating codes with chicken bones. Every visitor became a possible ally. Every object became a weapon. The guards took notice. Some grew uneasy. The queen smiles too often, one said. She knows something. She did. The legend of Lamballe's survival became a virus. It infected the Jacobins with paranoia. If she had escaped, what else had they failed to kill? Were there royalist cells growing like tumors inside the city? Could the queen from her cage still command loyalty? Robespierre became obsessed. He demanded tighter prison searches. He ordered spies to infiltrate kitchens and latrines. But with every act of control, his grip loosened. He had killed the body of the monarchy, but now he faced something worse, the specter of memory. And memory, like a ghost, cannot be beheaded. One night, a guard found the queen praying not to God but to Lamballe. She whispered not for salvation but for fire, for vengeance, for retribution. Her voice echoed like a curse. In a tavern near the Rue de Fossé, a blind old woman swore she saw a cloaked figure leaving the temple at midnight. No feet, she whispered. She floated. The myth twisted into terror. Children feared the Dame Blanche, the White Lady of the Revolution who bled ink and wept pearls. Adults began locking their windows tight. Some claimed their dreams were haunted by a woman with torn lips and eyes full of fire. The line between Lamballe's survival and her resurrection blurred. And through it all, deep beneath the stones, Lamballe listened. She had not revealed herself to the queen. Not yet. The timing was not right, but the queen knew. She could feel her in the air like dust stirred from ancient bones. They were connected now by something darker than friendship. Shared trauma, shared rage, shared survival. Their bond had always drawn suspicion. Now it drew power. And the revolution which once fed on fear of kings began to tremble at the fear of women. Not queens with crowns, but queens with scars. Ghosts in silk, mothers with nothing left to lose. Paris had created a monster when it tore Lamballe from the court, but it had failed to kill her. And now the monster had a message. The bloodbath had only just begun. They expected her to decay body and mind. The once radiant Queen of France reduced to a husk in a stone cell, broken by hunger and grief. But now, she was changing. Not visibly at first. The guards didn't notice until too late. The way she moved, the way she watched. She was no longer just waiting to die. Marie Antoinette had become still, not passive, but patient. She spoke less, but when she did, her voice carried like iron wrapped in silk. She held eye contact longer. She smiled when they read out the names of the newly executed, even when she recognized them. Something had shifted. The queen's faith in fate had died with her husband, but Lamballe's survival gave her something darker than hope. It gave her purpose. In the candlelit corners of her cell, she plotted. Not grandly, not like a general, but like a spider spinning a web thread by fragile thread. She began to manipulate her jailers not through pleas, but through presence. She complimented one on his daughter's handwriting. Another she prayed for when he coughed. Small gestures meaningless to most, but in a city soaked with guilt, kindness became poison. They softened. They trusted her. And when she asked for paper scraps, for warmer blankets, for old books, she received them. Those books became more than comfort. They became tools. Between faded lines of scripture, she scribbled secret messages in crushed blackberry juice, invisible until soaked in vinegar or flame. She tore pages and folded them into fans, handing them off with her linens. Sometimes she'd leave a single pin in a folded cloth, an old court signal understood only by her former ladies-in-waiting. Through this code, she learned of arrests, executions, escapes. She learned when Robespierre coughed, when Danton hesitated, when Lafayette fled. The prison walls didn't mute her. They amplified her. And she was no longer alone. Across the city, those loyal to the crown began hearing of her resurgence. Rumors spread. The queen is reading again. The queen is planning something. The queen is waiting. But for what, Lamballe? Though they hadn't spoken, they moved in tandem now. The queen lit fires in people's hearts while Lamballe stirred nightmares. One shined with fading grace, the other slithered through the gutters of Paris, whispering promises of reckoning. Together they became something the revolution hadn't anticipated, a two-headed revenant born of tragedy, feasting on myth. Marie Antoinette began shaping her image not as monarch but martyr. She dressed simply. She refused to weep. When questioned by guards, she held her silence like a sword. And soon the people outside began to notice. Women once spitting on her carriage now whispered about her defiance. She wears black every day, they said, like she's already buried the world. One letter intercepted by Jacobin spies chilled them to the bone. It read, "The queen walks with death now, and death has a name. It's Lamballe." The letter was unsigned. No one knew who sent it. But Robespierre took no chances. He ordered a public reaffirmation of her weakness. They published cartoons of her defecating in prison, of her seducing guards, of her bloated face crying in filth. But the public didn't laugh like before. Something had curdled in the air. The myth of Marie Antoinette had begun to evolve. No longer just the foreign harlot, the decadent queen, they now called her La Veuve Noire, the Black Widow. Not just mourning her king, waiting for something, for someone. And that someone was still crawling through the veins of the city, whispering to butchers, prostitutes, seamstresses, and orphans. Lamballe's story became a contagion. She was dead. She was alive. She had become the sewer witch, the bleeding saint, the woman with no skin and burning eyes. The fear of her death had fueled the revolution, but the fear of her return would unravel it. Marie Antoinette began to smile. At her trial, when the judge accused her of orchestrating conspiracy, she remained silent. When they claimed she slept with her own son, she didn't flinch. Her dignity in the face of filth only deepened the chill she cast. One witness said her eyes had become mirrors without reflection, nothing behind them but snow and glass. They did not see a queen. They saw a curse. The Revolutionary Tribunal realized too late that executing her might make things worse. The people had seen her transform from villain to victim, to something unspeakable, a woman who refused to be erased. And if Lamballe truly walked the city, what vengeance might follow. Delaying the execution became political strategy. Keep her alive. Discredit her slowly. Drain her mystique. But the queen no longer feared death. She feared silence. She feared obscurity. And now, thanks to Lamballe, she had neither. For the first time in months, she began to hum lullabies again. Not for herself. Not for her son. For Paris. A cradle of blood rocked gently by ghosts. And when the blade finally came, it would not be an ending. It would be the beginning of something far more terrifying. October 16th, 1793. The carts creaked over cobblestones soaked in last night's rain and last week's blood. Marie Antoinette, draped in white like a sacrificial lamb, was led to the scaffold. Her hands were bound. Her hair, once powdered and piled high, had been crudely hacked short to better expose her neck to the guillotine's kiss. But that kiss never came. Not in this version. Just as the blade was to be released, a disturbance broke out. Screams erupted from the rear of the crowd. Someone shouted, "Fire!" Others heard assassins. A shot rang out, then another. The crowd panicked. Men surged forward, others fled. The executioner, startled, hesitated. His hands shook. In the chaos, a hooded figure lunged toward the cart. Two more emerged from the alley, blades drawn, cutting down a pair of distracted guards. The queen was pulled from her knees, lifted like a rag doll into a waiting carriage, hidden beneath piles of rotting laundry and straw. By the time the National Guard restored order, the scaffold was empty, the basket clean, the blade unused, and Paris howled. The official story was one of chaos, a royalist ambush, cowardly traitors. But beneath the fury there was something worse fear. The queen was alive. And she was gone. Robespierre's face was pale for days. He refused to speak publicly. Behind closed doors he lashed out at his own advisors. "You said she was broken," he screamed. "You said she was finished, but Antoinette had slipped the butcher's blade, and now no one knew where she was. Rumors spread like fire across the city, that she had escaped with the help of foreign agents, that her ghost was already in the catacombs, that she had been taken by a woman dressed in black, with skin like marble and eyes like flame. Lamballe." The myth deepened. Two women, both presumed dead, now alive, now united, now beyond the reach of the law. The revolution had failed to kill its most symbolic enemy, not just physically, but spiritually. In the days that followed, Paris became a city gnawed by its own teeth. Suspicion bloomed like tumors. Neighbors accused each other of harboring fugitives. Old friends vanished overnight. Robespierre, desperate to maintain order, expanded the scope of the terror. The guillotine worked overtime. People once considered allies were marched to the scaffold. Danton, Hébert. Even those who had helped lead the revolution now stood accused of royalist sympathies, of knowing the queen still lived, and saying nothing. One man, a baker's apprentice, was publicly executed for whispering to his wife that the queen didn't look afraid. The terror had already been monstrous, but now it turned rabid. Because it wasn't just politics anymore, it was paranoia. They didn't fear the queen. They feared what she had become. Some swore she had returned to Versailles in secret, walking its halls like a ghost, caressing tapestries with ruined hands. Others claimed she wandered cemeteries speaking to the dead. A woman claimed to see her reflection in a bucket of water, dressed in mourning lips sewn shut. People locked their doors not against thieves, but against her. But it wasn't just fear driving the city mad, it was grief. Marie Antoinette, by surviving, had reclaimed something more powerful than the throne myth. Her escape became an open wound in the heart of revolutionary ideology. She had not begged. She had not screamed. She had not given them the satisfaction. And Lamballe had orchestrated it all. That name, once a footnote, now echoed louder than kings. She was the architect of resurrection, the hand that pulled Marie from the brink of death. No one knew how she moved. No one could trace her steps. She was seen in 5 districts at once. Some claimed she flew. In the National Convention, voices cracked with panic. "We are being hunted by ghosts," one delegate whispered. "This is no longer a republic. It is a seance." Every street held a new horror, a mutilated revolutionary pamphleteer found hanging from a butcher's hook. The words "I saw her" carved into his chest. A priest who denounced the queen discovered impaled on the very pike that once bore Lamballe's head. His eyes had been removed. Coins placed on his tongue. Lamballe had learned the language of the revolution, and she was speaking it back one body at a time. Robespierre ordered her name struck from all archives. There was no such woman, he declared. Only aristocratic fiction, but it was too late. The people believed, and belief was poison. The revolution began to eat itself. The line between loyalist and traitor became so thin, so brittle, that it broke completely. Every accusation was fatal. every trial a performance. The guillotine no longer served justice, it served fear. And still, neither the queen nor Lamballe reappeared. They vanished like smoke, like curses spoken in the dark. But every scream in the night, every flicker of movement in an alley, every knock on a door after midnight, reminded Paris that they were still out there, waiting, breathing, plotting. It began with a scream in the night, then another, and another. By spring of 1794, Paris had become a mouth full of broken teeth, gnashing, howling, unable to swallow the blood it kept drinking. The guillotine was no longer feared, it was familiar. The sharp finality of its blade almost merciful compared to what was now unfolding in the shadows. The terror, once a political mechanism to defend the revolution, had turned rabid. The leaders no longer trusted each other. Robespierre barely slept. He paced the floor of his chamber, whispering about phantoms and traitors, his eyes sunken. His fingernails chewed to the quick. He had seen the reports. A rotted body hanging in a marketplace. Eyes gouged, heart missing. The words for the queen, scrawled in faces beside it. He knew. Lamballe had returned, or something wearing her name like a skin. Public executions became bloodier, slower. Instead of just the blade floggings returned. People were burned alive, dismembered. Witches' punishments revived for spiritual sedition. The crowds once jubilant now watched in silence. Something in the air had changed. The revolution had tried to kill monsters. Now it had become one. Every building in Paris had eyes. A neighbor could denounce you, a child, a butcher, a midwife. Priests were dragged from altars, poets, strangled with their own manuscripts. And through it all, two names remained unspoken in official discourse, but whispered, like curses behind closed doors, Lamballe and Antoinette. People began seeing her. Not just one her, but many. A woman in black on the Pont Neuf at midnight, placing lilies into the river, murmuring in Latin. A pale figure glimpsed in a cathedral ruin, brushing dust from a shattered stained glass window, depicting St. Catherine Lamballe's favorite. Children claimed she tapped at their windows with bone fingers. Old men swore they heard her singing lullabies outside the execution sites, lullabies once reserved for the Dauphin. Then came the fire. An entire city block in the Marais gone in one night. Officially an accident, but no one believed that. A charred body was found nailed to a church door, its mouth forced open with molten silver. Pinned beside it, a silk ribbon bearing the royal monogram M.I. The symbolism was unmistakable. The queen was back. Or at least the idea of her. Alive or dead, it no longer mattered. The revolution had created a mythology it could not control, and the people, tired, starving, terrified, began to believe. What if she had survived? What if she was watching more terrifying still? What if she was judging Robespierre-launched purges against his own allies? He feared infiltration. He feared assassination. He feared dreams. He was seen praying, then weeping, then laughing at nothing. He reportedly refused food not tasted first by a servant. Some say he ordered his own reflection removed, smashing every mirror in his home. In secret, some of his inner circle began questioning his sanity. Others wondered if he had made some kind of pact if he had allowed the queen to escape, and now reaped the consequences. One night, a young revolutionary guard named Lucien Desmarais failed to report for duty. His body was found in the sewer days later. His skin, flayed, tongue removed, and a note pinned to his chest with a pin carved from ivory. The lamb is not so gentle anymore. The handwriting matched no known hand. But the paper bore watermarks from the queen's former stationery. Across the provinces, the nightmare spread. A fire in Lyon reduced an entire barracks to ash after a drunken soldier toasted the end of that Austrian bitch. In Bordeaux, 10 children died of fright after playing a game called Find the Queen's Head, where one girl claimed to actually see the real thing with eyes that still blinked. In Paris, sleep became a rare commodity. Everyone feared the knock at the door, or worse, the absence of a knock, just silence, then a cold draft, then the smell of lavender and rot. By the summer of 1794, the Jacobin leadership was crumbling. Many believed France could no longer survive this haunting. If Lamballe truly lived, she had become more than a person, she was vengeance incarnate. If she had died, then something much darker had risen in her place. Robespierre tried to regain control through escalation. He announced the Festival of the Supreme Being, a grotesque spectacle designed to present him as France's moral compass. He smiled like a corpse standing on an artificial mountain surrounded by flames, declaring victory over fear. But the crowd didn't cheer. They stared, eyes wide. Some wept, because among them, standing still half-shadowed, was a woman in a veil. A white veil unmoving in the windless square. No one could see her face. But every person swore they felt her looking at them. And when they blinked, she was gone. The following morning, Robespierre awoke to a letter in his bed. No seal, no handwriting, just a strip of flesh inside. He screamed until blood vessels burst in his throat. The letter read, "You took her head. I took your soul. We are not finished." And somewhere beneath Paris, in the bones and blackness, a woman with glassy eyes sharpened a blade against the stone. Not for power, not for glory, but for memory. Because the dead do not rest when history lies. They walk and they remember. History tells us that Louis XVI died in a prison cell, alone, starved, riddled with disease, a boy king who never ruled a day. His tiny corpse, when found, had lesions, open sores, and scars that couldn't be explained by illness alone. They say he cried out for his mother in his final hours, but no one came. In this version of history, someone does come. They smuggle him out beneath the cover of night, wrapped in grave linens, unconscious, near death. The switch is unthinkable, another boy unclaimed and terminally ill left in his place. A pauper sacrificed for a prince. A tragic trade, but one that will shake the future to its roots. The queen, now a fugitive, veiled and nameless, meets her son in a barn outside Paris. He doesn't recognize her at first. His eyes are sunken, his arms thin as reeds. He flinches when touched. He doesn't speak. She weeps not out of relief, but guilt. She realizes what they did to him. The real punishment was never her imprisonment. It was this, her son raised in horror, abandoned, broken from the inside out. Whatever crown he may someday wear, he will never be whole again. And still she clutches him, because he is hers. Lamballe watches from the shadows. She says nothing. She simply nods once her eyes dark hollows. Her work is not finished. They flee. Not to Austria, nor England, nor Spain. Those places are no longer safe. Too many eyes. Too many betrayals. They vanish instead into the rural heart of France, into villages choked by ash and whispers. Places where no one trusts a stranger. Places haunted not just by war, but by myth. Marie Antoinette becomes Madame Roche. A widow, she sells lace. She wears black. She raises the boy in silence, teaching him the names of flowers, the positions of stars, the sounds of different footsteps in the dark. She does not speak of Versailles. She does not speak of the guillotine, but every night she kneels and whispers to a ghost that never answers, "Je suis désolé, Lamballe. I am so sorry." And still the boy watches her always. His eyes are intelligent, but there's something behind them, something waiting. Years pass. The queen grows thinner. The boy grows stranger. He speaks to birds. He arranges dead mice in perfect little rows. He recites revolutionary slogans. Backward. When Marie asks him where he learned them, he says, "She told me." One night she hears him laughing. Not a child's laugh. A man's. And when she enters the room, she sees Lamballe sitting beside him. Or something shaped like her. Lamballe never aged. Not in any way that time could touch. She appears when storms roll in. When the boy bleeds from nightmares. When Marie begins to doubt she ever escaped Paris at all. She offers no comfort. Only reminders. "Your son will never forgive you," she says once. "Why would he?" Marie whispers. "I don't forgive myself." The queen dies in her sleep shortly thereafter. Peacefully, some say. But when her body is found, her hands are crossed over her chest in the shape of a guillotine's blade. Her son does not cry. He buries her beneath the floorboards of an abandoned chapel. No name, no marker, just silence. And then the boy becomes something else. He travels. First to Lyon, then to Marseille, then across the countryside. Always alone, always quiet. He wears gloves even in summer. His eyes remain unreadable. In 1815, during the 100 days of Napoleon's brief return from exile, a strange figure is reported near the battlefield at Waterloo. A young man, pale, dressed in mourning, seen walking alone through the bodies after the final cannon falls silent. He removes the ring from one dead officer's hand. He whispers into another man's open mouth. Witnesses say he laughed once and walked away with blood dripping from his sleeves. Is this Louis XVII? No one knows. But the rumors grow. A cult begins forming in the shadows of Europe. They call him Le Fils de la Nuit, the son of the night. They claim he carries his mother's pain and his godmother's wrath, that he will return to Paris when the city has forgotten its sins, and make it remember. Throughout the 19th century, political dissidents vanish. Royalist symbols appear scrawled in blood on jail walls, the fleur-de-lis painted with bone marrow. Revolutionaries claim their dreams are haunted by a pale child who whispers dates that haven't happened yet. One dream recurs again and again, a throne made of skeletons, a crown of teeth, a boy with no shadow who says, "I remember you." The monarchy was supposed to end with Louis XVII. The revolution was supposed to kill it forever, but in this history it survived wounded, warped, and unrecognizable. Not in gold or marble, but in vengeance, in rot, in silence. Lamballe, they say, still walks with him, not as mother, not as protector, but as the memory that cannot be silenced. She taught him one truth above all others. Justice is only justice when it makes them afraid to forget. And France? Never forgot. Centuries later, Paris thrives. Crowded cafes, lights glimmering on the Seine, tourists lining up to see the Palace of Versailles, the Conciergerie, the tomb of Napoleon. The guillotine is long gone. The revolution is a memory, a chapter in a schoolbook. But dig deep enough beneath the museums, beneath the metro lines, and the bones still whisper. In 1896, workers expanding the Paris catacombs discovered a hidden chamber sealed behind limestone. Inside, hundreds of bones arranged into a throne. Upon it, a single object, a rusted pike with a fractured ivory mask affixed to the tip. A grotesque feminine face, cracked and eyeless. A royal insignia etched faintly beneath the jaw, MTL de Savoie. Princess de Lamballe? Authorities claimed it was a hoax, an artist's provocation. But the chamber was resealed quietly without press. No records remain of what else was found inside. And yet, the sightings continued. 1923. A historian researching the September massacres throws himself into the Seine after claiming he had spoken to a woman in white beneath the city. She told me everything he wrote, and I was never meant to know. 1942. During the Nazi occupation, 2 German officers disappear after desecrating graves in a Versailles crypt. The bodies are never found. One soldier's diary ends with a final line. We heard a woman singing. We followed. God help us. 1968. A group of student protesters paint "The Queen Will Rise" across the gates of the Pantheon. That same night, a small explosion rocks the catacombs. No cause is ever identified, but an old guard is found wandering the tunnels barefoot, muttering, "She walks again, the one without a face." Even now in the digital age, strange messages appear on forums and message boards. An image of a silk ribbon soaked in something red. A voice recording of a lullaby sung in 18th century French. A GPS coordinate pointing to an unmarked grave. The username La Veuve Noire 93. The past does not rest, not when it's been drowned in injustice. Lamballe never received a burial. Her head was paraded, her body desecrated. She was turned into a spectacle, then forgotten. But she never forgot. Because the horror of history isn't just what happened, it's what we refuse to remember. So the next time you stroll through Paris, pay attention to the wind. Listen in the tunnels. Watch for the flicker of a white veil in the corner of your eye. And if you ever hear footsteps behind you but turn and see no one, keep walking. And whatever you do, don't speak her name. Because in the end, the revolution may have won the war, but Lamballe won the memory. If this story disturbed you, good. History is full of ghosts, and some of them are still waiting to be heard. If you want more terrifying alternate histories, real royal conspiracies, and the dark secrets empires tried to bury, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. We descend into the darkness every week, and trust me, we're just getting started. Until next time, stay haunted.